My name is Carol, and this happened back in the 1970s, when I was in my 20s, living in a quiet little neighborhood outside Chicago. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Kids rode their bikes until the streetlights came on. Neighbors borrowed sugar. Nothing ever happened here. That's what made what happened next so hard to believe. There was a man who lived a few houses down from us. Let's call him Wayne. He was a contractor, ran his own little business, always had a truck full of tools parked out front. He was involved in everything: local community events, block parties, even the Democratic Party fundraisers downtown. If there was a barbecue, he was there flipping burgers. If a kid needed a ride to Little League, he'd offer before you even asked. And then there was the clown thing. Wayne loved dressing up as a clown for kids' parties. He'd painted his own face, made his own costume, called himself by a goofy clown name. Parents thought it was charming, free entertainment, and the guy clearly loved bringing joy to children. My own son begged me to invite him to his birthday party once. I said, maybe next year. Looking back now, I get chills just typing that sentence. The first strange thing I remember was small, really small. One evening I was walking my dog past his house, and I noticed the smell, a thick, sour smell coming from somewhere near his property, like something rotting. I figured maybe a raccoon had died under his porch. I didn't think twice about it. People mentioned the smell a few times over the months, and every time, there was some explanation. A busted sewage line, dead rodents. Wayne even joked about it himself, saying his basement flooded and something died down there he hadn't found yet. Then there were the boys. Wayne always seemed to have young men coming and going from his house. He told everyone he hired teenagers for construction work, said he liked giving young guys in the neighborhood a chance to earn some money. A few parents thought it was generous of him. Good, honest work for boys who needed direction. Some of the boys who visited his house, we just never saw again, but nobody thought much of it at the time. Teenagers leave home, stop calling, lose touch. That's normal, right? So if a mother said her son hadn't called in weeks, people just said, "Oh, you know how boys are at that age?" I want you to sit with that for a second. How many times has someone brushed off a missing person as just a phase? None of it happened all at once. It was slow. A missing person report here, a rumor there. Nothing that felt like a big red flag on its own. And through all of it, Wayne stayed exactly the same. Same friendly guy at every party. Same burgers on the grill. Same clown costume. Everyone still liked him. Until a teenage boy named Robert vanished after telling his mother he was heading to talk to a contractor about a summer job. Robert's mother wasn't the type to let things go quietly. She called the police again and again until they finally started looking harder. The trail led straight to Wayne's front door. When police searched his property, the smell that neighbors had joked about for years finally made horrifying sense. Underneath his house, in the crawl space beneath the floorboards, they found human remains. Not one, not two, dozens. Investigators worked for weeks, digging up bodies from beneath a home where birthday parties had been thrown, where a clown had once made children laugh. By the time it was over, Wayne had confessed to murdering more than 30 young men and boys, most of them lured to his house under the same promise of work, then assaulted and killed inside the very walls that neighbors like me had walked past 100 times, smelling something we chose not to question. I remember standing on my porch the day the news vans arrived, watching detectives carry bags out of a house I used to consider one of the friendliest on the block. My own son had wanted a clown at his party. My own son. Wayne was arrested, tried, and eventually executed years later. But for those of us who lived near him, the sentencing didn't end anything, because the real horror was never really about him. It was about how long we lived beside it, how many warning signs we explained away, because a man smiled enough, waved enough, seemed helpful enough. To this day, when I smell something faintly rotten and can't place where it's coming from, my stomach turns. Because somewhere, once, that smell had an answer, and none of us wanted to hear it. If there's one thing I've learned from living next to a man like that, it's this. Monsters don't always hide. Sometimes they wear a smile. They wave from their porch. They show up to every party, and the neighborhood cheers for them right up until the day the truth comes up from underneath the floor. My name is Claire. This happened last spring when my husband Ryan and I bought our first house together outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a small one-story house on a quiet street. Nothing fancy. A decent yard, a tall fence, that fresh paint smell that makes a new house feel exciting. We had been renting for 6 years. This was supposed to be the happy part of our story. The neighbors on our left were a young family, busy, friendly, always waving. The neighbors on our right were an older couple, Barbara and Walt, maybe late 60s. And from the very first day, they were nice, really nice, almost too nice. The day we moved in, Barbara brought over a basket of fresh tomatoes. Walt shook Ryan's hand and said, if we ever needed anything, just knock on his door. They seemed like perfect neighbors. Remember that feeling? Because it doesn't last. The first strange thing I noticed was the garden. Walt had a huge vegetable garden along our shared fence, rows of tomatoes, squash, and other vegetables. It was pretty, but it was also way too big for just 2 people. And he worked in it all the time, not just morning and evening. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, look out the kitchen window, and see a flashlight moving between the rows. Every single night, rain or clear sky didn't matter. I joked to Ryan once, does Walt ever sleep? Ryan laughed it off. He's old. Old people don't sleep much. That made sense, so I let it go. About 3 weeks in, our dog Biscuit started acting strange near the fence. He'd stand there, totally still, staring into Walt's garden, not barking, just staring, tail tucked between his legs. One afternoon, Biscuit got through a small gap in the fence before I could stop him. I ran around through the side gate to get to him, and by the time I reached him, he was digging fast, right at the edge of Walt's tomato rows. I pulled him back. That's when I saw what he had dug up. It was pale and curved, about the size of my hand. For 1 second, my mind went to a bad place. Then I told myself, it's just a root, or a bone from a barbecue. It's nothing. I didn't look closer. I filled the hole back in and went inside. I didn't tell Ryan. I'm not sure why. Maybe I just didn't want it to be real. That night, Walt knocked on our door. He was smiling, like always, but he stood a little too close, like he wanted to look past me into the house. Heard your dog got into my garden today, he said, still smiling. I said sorry, told him it wouldn't happen again. He just nodded slowly and said something I still think about. That's all right. Just don't let him dig there again. Some things you plant, you gotta let finish growing. He said it so casually, like a joke. I laughed, but I don't know why. He walked back to his house. I stood at my door for a long time before I locked it. After that night, I started watching him too. Not on purpose, but once you notice something, you can't stop noticing it. I'd catch him standing by the fence at odd hours, just looking at our house, not gardening, just standing there, watching our windows. Barbara kept coming over with food, but she started asking odd questions too. How long were we staying in the house? Did we want kids? Did our families visit often? Who knew where we lived? I told myself she was just a lonely old woman who liked to talk. I told myself a lot of things that spring. The week everything changed started with a smell. It came over the fence on warm afternoons. Sweet at first, then sour underneath. a smell that made my stomach turn before I understood why. Ryan blamed the compost pile. Then, late one night, Biscuit started barking at the back door. Not his normal bark, a low, scared growl. I looked out the window and saw Walt in his garden at almost 1 a.m., digging, not planting, digging things out. He pulled something long and heavy, wrapped in a dark tarp, out of the ground and dragged it toward his shed. I should have called the police right then. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, until he went into the shed and the light turned off. The next morning, I finally told Ryan everything. The bone, the strange comment, the tarp. He didn't laugh this time. We talked about calling the police. But what would we even say? Our old neighbor gardens at night, and our dog once dug up something bone-shaped? We had no proof, just a cold, heavy feeling in our stomachs. That afternoon, while Walt and Barbara were out, Ryan and I looked closely at that garden for the first time. Really looked. We noticed something we had missed for weeks. Past the tomato rows, there were small patches of bare dirt. Nothing grew there. The ground looked raised and uneven, like it had been dug up and never quite settled back down. 4 patches, all about the same size as a person. We packed up within a week, told the realtor a half-true story about a job change. Barbara actually cried when we left. Walt just shook Ryan's hand and said, "Shame." This soil was finally starting to take. We never called the police. We never dug up those patches ourselves. We told ourselves it was probably nothing. A strange hobby, a bad smell, an imaginative dog. But I still think about those 4 patches of bare dirt sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep. We sold that house for less than we paid for it. We never went back. And I never asked Walt what he meant by finish growing. I don't think I want to know. I moved to the suburbs of Pennsylvania about 6 years ago with my husband Mark, and I've dealt with my fair share of weird people. But nothing prepared me for what happened with our neighbor, and honestly, I still don't have any real answers. I just have a bad feeling that hasn't gone away. We have 2 kids. Emily is 9, and our son Caleb just turned 7. Our street is about as normal as it gets. Small ranch houses, minivans in every driveway. A cul-de-sac 2 blocks down, where the older kids ride their bikes. The kind of place you move to specifically because nothing happens there. And for the first few years, nothing did. The bus stop for our street is on the corner, right where our road meets the bigger one that leads out to the highway. It's a decent walk, maybe 4 minutes, and every morning I'd walk the kids down there, with a couple other parents from the block. We'd stand around in our pajama pants holding coffee, half asleep, watching our kids goof around until the bus showed up. It was routine. It was boring. It was safe. Then, last September, a man moved into the house on the corner, the one directly across from where our street's kids caught their ride to school. We didn't think much of it at first. New people move here all the time. He kept to himself, didn't introduce himself to anyone, which wasn't exactly unusual either. Some people just aren't the neighborly type. It was maybe 2 weeks after he moved in that I first noticed him standing in his driveway in the mornings. Every single school day, right around 7:40, he'd be out there, just standing, phone in his hand. At first I assumed he was waiting for his own ride, or checking his mail, or just a guy who liked his coffee outside. I didn't think twice about it. But then I noticed the angle of his phone. He wasn't looking down at it, scrolling like you would if you were checking messages. He was holding it up, at chest height, angled toward the bus stop, toward the kids. I told myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people hold their phones weird. Maybe he was on a call. Maybe he was just standing there, and it looked like more than it was. I mentioned it to another mom on our street, Dana, mostly just making conversation. She looked at me and said, "Oh, thank God. I thought I was the only one who noticed that." Turns out she'd seen the same thing for almost a week. Same time, every morning, phone up, angled at the kids. We started paying closer attention after that. And once you notice something like that, you can't unnotice it. Every morning, without fail, he'd come out around 7:35, stand in his driveway, and hold his phone up until the bus pulled away around 7:48. 13 minutes, every single day, rain or shine. I want to be fair here. I know how this sounds. A man standing in his own driveway isn't a crime. He has every right to be there. But something about the consistency of it, the specific timing, the way he never actually looked at the kids directly, just held the phone up like he was documenting something. It got under my skin in a way I couldn't shake. One morning, I decided enough was enough. Mark was working from home that day, so I asked him to come down to the bus stop with me. I walked straight across the street while the kids were getting on the bus, and I asked the man, point blank, what he was doing every morning. He lowered his phone slowly. He was maybe mid-40s, unremarkable looking, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after seeing it. He smiled, too calm, too rehearsed, and said, "Just taking pictures of my car, thinking about selling it." His car was a gray sedan, parked in the garage, not even visible from where he was standing. I didn't say anything else. I just walked back across the street, my heart pounding, feeling like an idiot for even asking, but also feeling like something was very wrong. That night, I told Mark everything, and for the first time, he seemed to actually take it seriously. We talked about calling the police, but what would we even say? A man stood in his own driveway and held his phone up. There's no law against that. We didn't have any actual proof. He was photographing our children specifically, not something concrete. Just a feeling, a pattern, a bad excuse about a car that wasn't visible. A few days later, Dana came to me looking pale. She said her daughter Ava had come home from school talking about the picture man. When Dana pressed her, Ava said that a few weeks ago, the man had waved at her from his car in the school pickup line. Not the bus stop, the actual pickup line, at the school itself, which is 1.5 miles away. Ava said he knew her name. She'd never spoken to him before in her life. That's when the panic really set in. We started asking around, and it turned out at least 3 other families on our street had noticed the same thing. The phone in the driveway, the strange timing, small unsettling interactions. Their kids had mentioned in passing that none of the parents had thought much of until now. A comment here, a wave there, a man who somehow knew which kid belonged to which house. We called the police. An officer came out, took a report, walked over, and had a conversation with the man himself. When the officer came back, he told us there wasn't much they could do. The man denied everything, said he was simply outside enjoying his morning, said the pickup line thing was a misunderstanding. He claimed to have mistaken Ava for a co-worker's daughter, which made no sense to any of us, since he didn't have co-workers, since he didn't seem to have a job at all. The officer told us that without solid evidence, an actual photo, an actual video, something more than pattern and suspicion, there wasn't a case to build. He suggested we set up cameras of our own if we were that concerned, so we did. Ring cameras, a couple of us, pointed toward the bus stop and the street. For a week, the man didn't come outside at all. His car didn't move. His lights stayed off at night. Some of us thought maybe he'd gotten the message, backed off, realized we were watching. Then one morning, exactly 8 days later, he was back in the driveway. Same time, same phone. Except now he was standing at a slightly different angle. Angled not toward the bus stop, but toward one of our cameras. He knew we were watching, and he wanted us to know that he knew. That was the last straw for most of the families on the street. 2 of them moved their kids' pickup spot to a stop 3 streets over, adding an extra 10 minutes to their morning walk just to avoid him. Dana started driving Ava to school herself instead of using the bus at all. Mark and I debated moving. We'd only been in the house 4 years. We loved it, and the idea of uprooting our whole life because of a man who technically hadn't broken a single law felt insane. But every morning, watching that man stand there with his phone raised, I felt something in my chest tighten that I couldn't explain to anyone who wasn't standing there with me. We ended up doing the same as Dana. No more bus stop. I drive the kids myself now, every single morning, out of our own driveway, so he never has a window to catch them standing still. It's been about 4 months now. He still stands out there some mornings. Not every day anymore, but enough that I notice when I glance out the window while getting the kids' backpacks ready. Phone up, same angle, watching an empty corner where children used to stand. But the worst part happened about a week after that. It was a Tuesday night, close to midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I got up to get a glass of water, and out of habit, I glanced out our upstairs window, the one that faces the street toward the corner. His house was dark, like always, but down on the street, right under the streetlight, he was standing there, just staring straight at our house, not doing anything, just standing under that light, facing our house, at midnight. I froze. I didn't turn on any lights, didn't move, just watched him from behind the curtain for what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds. And then, like he somehow knew exactly where I was standing behind that glass, he slowly raised his hand and waved. Not a friendly wave. Slow, deliberate, like he wanted me to know he could see me, even though every light in our house was off. I woke Mark up immediately. By the time we both got back to the window, the street was empty. The streetlight was still on, but he was gone. We checked every window in the house that night. We didn't sleep. The next morning, Mark walked over and rang his doorbell. No answer. He rang it again and again, probably 10 or 11 times over 20 minutes, banging on the door at one point. The car was in the driveway. Every blind in the house was shut tight, which we'd never seen before. Usually at least 1 or 2 were cracked open. Nothing. No sound, no movement, nothing. We called the police again and filed a second report, mostly so there'd be an official record if anything else happened. The officer said the same thing as before. Standing in your own driveway at night isn't illegal. Waving isn't a threat. There's nothing actionable here. Since that night, we haven't seen him outside once.